Student, is there not some attitude of mind which one should in truth assume in order to understand the occult in nature? Sage, such attitude of mind must be attained as will enable one to look into the realities of things. The mind must escape from the mere formalities and conventions of life, even though outwardly one seems to obey all of them, and should be firmly established on the truth that man is a copy of the universe, and has in himself a portion of the Supreme Being. To the extent this is realized will be the clearness of perception of truth. A realization of this leads inevitably to the conclusion that all other men and beings are united with us, and this removes the egotism which is the result of the notion of separateness. When the truth of unity is understood, then distinctions due to comparisons made, like the Pharisees, that one is better than his neighbor, disappear from the mind, leaving it more pure and free to act. Student, what would you point out as a principal foe to the mind's grasping of truth? Sage, the principal foe of a secondary nature is what was once called fantasy. That is the reappearance of thoughts and images due to recollection or memory. Memory is an important power, but mind in itself is not memory. Mind is restless and wandering in its nature, and must be controlled. Its wandering disposition is necessary, or stagnation would result. But it can be controlled and fixed upon an object or idea. Now, as we are constantly looking at and hearing of new things, the natural restlessness of the mind becomes prominent when we set about pinning it down. Then memory of many objects, things, subjects, duties, persons, circumstances, and affairs brings up before it the various pictures and thoughts belonging to them. After these the mind at once tries to go, and we find ourselves wandering from the point. It must henceforth follow that the storing of a multiplicity of useless and surely recurring thoughts is an obstacle to the acquirement of truth, and this obstacle is the very one peculiar to our present style of life. Student, can you mention some of the relations in which the sun stands to us, and nature in respect to occultism? Sage, it has many such and all important, but I would draw your attention first to the greater and more comprehensive. The sun is the center of our solar system. The life energies of that system come to it through the sun, which is a focus or reflector for the spot in space where the real center is. And not only comes mere life through that focus, but also much more that is spiritual in its essence. The sun should therefore not only be looked at with the eye, but thought of by the mind. It represents to the world what the higher self is to the man. It is the soul center of the world, with its 6 companions, as the higher self is the center for the 6 principles of man. So it supplies to those 6 principles of the man many spiritual essences and powers. He should for that reason think of it and not confine himself to gazing at it. So far as it acts materially in light, heat, and gravity, it will go on of itself, but man as a free agent must think upon it in order to gain what benefit can come only from his voluntary action in thought. Student: will you refer to some minor one? Sage: well, we sit in the sun for heat and possible chemical effects. But if at the same time we do this, we also think on it as the sun in the sky and of its possible essential nature, we thereby draw from it some of its energy and not otherwise touched. This can also be done on a dark day, when clouds obscure the sky, and some of the benefit thus be obtained. Natural mystics, learned and ignorant, have discovered this for themselves here and there, and have often adopted the practice. But it depends, as you see, upon the mind. Student: does the mind actually do anything when it takes up a thought and seeks for more light? Sage: it actually does. A thread or a finger or a long darting current flies out from the brain to seek for knowledge. It goes in all directions and touches all other minds it can reach, so as to receive the information if possible. This is telepathically, so to say, accomplished. There are no patents on the true knowledge of philosophy, nor copyrights in that realm. Personal rights of personal life are fully respected, save by potential black magicians who would take anyone's property. But general truth belongs to all, and when the unseen messenger from one mind arrives and touches the real mind of another, that other gives up to it what it may have of truth about general subjects. So the mind's finger or wire flies until it gets the thought or seed thought from the other and makes it its own. But our modern competitive system and selfish desire for gain and fame is constantly building a wall around people's minds, to everyone's detriment. Student: do you mean that the action you describe is natural, usual, and universal, or only done by those who know how and are conscious of it? Sage: it is universal, and whether the person is aware or not of what is going on. Very few are able to perceive it in themselves, but that makes no difference. It is done always. When you sit down to earnestly think on a philosophical or ethical matter, for instance, your mind flies off, touching other minds, and from them you get varieties of thought. If you are not well balanced and psychically purified, you will often get thoughts that are not correct. Such is your karma and the karma of the race. But if you are sincere and try to base yourself on right philosophy, your mind will naturally reject wrong notions. You can see in this how it is that systems of thought are made and kept going, even though foolish, incorrect, or pernicious. Student: what mental attitude and aspirations are the best safeguards in this, as likely to aid the mind in these searches to reject error and not let it fly into the brain? Sage: unselfishness, altruism in theory and practice, desire to do the will of the higher self, which is the Father in heaven, devotion to the human race. Subsidiary to these are discipline, correct thinking, and good education. Student: is the uneducated man, then, in a worse condition? Sage: not necessarily so. The very learned are so immersed in one system that they reject nearly all thoughts not in accord with preconceived notions. The sincere ignorant one is often able to get the truth, but not able to express it. The ignorant masses generally hold in their minds the general truths of nature, but are limited as to expression. And most of the best discoveries of scientific men have been obtained in this subconscious telepathic mode. Indeed, they often arrive in the learned brain from some obscure and so-called ignorant person, and then the scientific discoverer makes himself famous because of his power of expression and means for giving it out.